We're still focusing, keeping our focus on Ekiti. This morning, Chamberlain and Gimba put a call across to Ekiti this morning to find out the current status. You heard that the incumbent governor is still complaining about his security not being restored, and he believes that his freedom has been threatened. But we're still focusing on the elections that happened on Saturday, and we have joining us this morning Mr. Paul Arkwright, who is the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, and we also have with us Mr. Sulaiman Arigbabu, who is the Southwest Coordinator of the Transition Monitoring Group. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, High Commissioner. You were in Osun State. You went to visit the Oni of Ife, where you raised concerns. You had your fears about the elections coming up in Ekiti. What precisely were your fears?
Well, at the time I was heading towards Ekiti, and of course I was in Ekiti during the elections, and I was observing with a large group of colleagues from the British High Commission. At that time when I went to see the Oni of Ife, we were obviously concerned that there should not be any violence. We wanted to make sure that this was a peaceful election, that it was a free and fair and credible election, that everything was in place from the security all the way through to the officials from INEC and the polling units and everything that was in place. So I was not prejudging the election. I was saying that it was important that the conditions should be set so that people could go out, they could vote in line with their own opinions, aligned with their own conscience, and vote freely as they wish to in a secure environment. So those were the key points I was making there.
You didn't have any fears? I mean, even the fact that people had complained about security, 30,000 policemen at the very least, you know, not to talk about other security agencies being deployed, wasn't a source of concern for you?
Well, I think it's important that the security forces are there in order to provide the secure environment to help people to vote, to enable people to vote. I hadn't been in Ekiti by that stage. When I did get to Ekiti, I saw that the security agencies were there in place. I spoke to the DIG who was there. I spoke to the police commissioner, as did a number of other colleagues. I was there with the EU ambassador, for example. And we had a very good meeting with the security agencies, the police, etc., before the election, so that was on the Friday. And they assured us that everything was in place, that they would behave as they should. In other words, in a neutral way. They were there to provide security, not to interfere in any way. So I was pleased with those assurances.
And observers always say that the process is more important to them than the outcome. What did you observe? As an observer, what did you see?
Well, you're right, the process is important, and that's why I was there, and the British government has been supporting the process all the way through, and this was an important milestone on the road to 2019, of course. What I saw, I went out there, I went to the PDP candidates' local government area first thing in the south of the state, and then I moved up into the northern senatorial district. And there, with a team of colleagues, we went round the LGAs within the northern senatorial district. What we saw were polling units starting on time, materials there on time, orderly queues of people waiting for the polling units to open, so I got to a number of them before 8 o'clock. By and large, for the most part, I thought this was a process that went well. I have to give some praise to INEC and the officials, the presiding officers. They were clearly well trained. People were patiently waiting in line. There were some hitches, some problems, sometimes with the card reader. You know, they don't always work as well as they should. By and large, I would say the majority of the ones I saw, and of course I can only talk from my personal experience, were working, but there were some hitches along the way. And the security people provided that right kind of security environment and did not intervene, unless obviously there was some kind of unruly behaviour, in which case I think they intervened in a proper manner. Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm concerned with the process that I witnessed, that I saw, this was a process that went well, and I do want to give credit to INEC and indeed the security people who provided that environment to enable people to vote freely.
Let me come to you, Mr. Arigbabu. The Transition Monitoring Group has been around for a while, and you have observed elections over and over again. What did you notice any improvements on the conduct of this election, or did they give you even more concern, you know, especially as we go to Osun and we look towards 2019?
Thank you. The Ekiti election is a mixed bag. Indeed, our reports have said that INEC has improved. We did say that in our press release before the election, that what we've observed the INEC seems to have stepped up its game, and the conduct of the election did prove that. Of course, there are rooms for improvement, but INEC has done pretty well compared to previous elections. But why I say it's a mixed bag is that there are other parts of the elections that left a lot to be desired, and that has to do with us as citizens, and especially with the political parties and the political gladiators. The reason why there was a huge deployment, and this is a vicious cycle, politicians will stoke violence, will create an atmosphere of fear, and that will justify the deployment of excess security officers, and that will in turn probably instigate its own kind of violence, or most importantly, will affect voter turnout, increase apathy in this process. So it's a vicious cycle that we need to nip at some point. And of course, the worst that we saw in Ekiti is the incidence of inducement. We've been seeing it along the line, but in Ekiti it went way up there. It's quite a shame. It's something we all should be ashamed of, and it's something that politicians need to be taken up on. So that's why I say it's a mixed bag. But really importantly, we need to acknowledge the fact that INEC has improved tremendously on its process, and we can only help to sit down with INEC and look at what other things need to be done, because this is deployed at one state level. How is it going to look like when we are deploying at 36 states and the federal capital? Are we that ready? So that's what we need to be looking at with INEC. And there are some part of INEC processes that still need to be a little bit opened up. That's especially at the coalition, at the INEC situation and some others. We need to see what's happening at those places. Otherwise, INEC is doing well.
Well, security is definitely something of concern. We'll talk about vote buying in a moment, and we'll ask you if you did see incidences of that as well, because you're speaking more from your personal experience. But let's quickly take you up on security. A lot of civil society organizations complained. They were quite concerned about the level of security or the number of security personnel being deployed to Ekiti. The police said it was justifiable. They said that usually when you're deploying in 36 states, all the states are busy. But if you're looking at just one state, the other states might have room to come and cause some trouble in the state where elections are being conducted. Would you say that the concerns raised by civil society organizations were justified at the end of the day? Looking at the concerns for voter apathy, looking at the concerns for intimidation of people who might want to come out to vote?
Whilst we will say that the security officers eventually behaved civilly compared to 2014, because we're also on ground in 2014,